Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, the real wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. He says he's now one of the good guys. Dollar vigilante. Jeff Berwick believes national currencies are in grave danger. And Shadow Stats editor John Williams on untrustworthy government numbers. We'll talk to Jordan Belfort right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600. Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Sitting in for Phil Mackesy, here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Jordan Belfort, the real wolf of Wall Street. I guess if you're going to have somebody portray you, DiCaprio's not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's better than Danny DeVito, right?
That would be me.
I love Danny DeVito, but if I had to take my choice, I definitely would take Leo.
Well, anyway, Jordan, it's great to have you here to talk to us. And right up front, you admit you really manipulated the markets. You made a lot of money. Apparently, that's against the law.
It is against the law, and and I always say that, I'm one of those people, like when I was in jail and everyone's saying, I'm innocent, I'm like, well, I'm guilty. I deserve to be here. So I think that in some level it helped me deal with it, because when I, had to pay for what I had done wrong, I wasn't trying to, at that point, I wasn't trying to rationalize or minimize the mistakes I made. But I think what I did do right, and which ended up really changing my life and the lives of many people around the world, was I decided not to give up, and instead I wrote a book about it, and got very honest with the mistakes I made and also the successes that I had, and people connected with that book, and obviously Leo DiCaprio and Marty did, as well as Brad Pitt, who wanted to play the role too, and I chose Leo and Marty. And then when the movie came out, it's been a massive success. And over the years before the movie, I had developed a speaking business, and I think all wrapped up into one. People are inspired by the fact that when someone really is down, it's so easy to give up. And I think a lot of people around the world, they get that because they've been there or they are there, and they look to me as inspiration. And I also have the ability to teach them entrepreneurship skills and how to close deals and how to market. So together, it's a really powerful message.
Jordan, I was thinking, you were the best at getting money out of people. Perhaps you hadn't, but do you tell people how to avoid folks like you? I mean, I'm thinking of another DiCaprio role, Catch Me If You Can. I mean, he was a great fraud artist, and then he ended up working for the FBI.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I've done a lot of speeches around the world for the FBI. I've done it for the Australian Federal Police, and I've spoken, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, 500 investigators. And I have absolutely done that. But one of the things I always say, and this is why what you said is so interesting, is that when I go around the world and I teach people the art of influence and persuasion and marketing, and and especially those in entrepreneurship too, but especially the sales and marketing and and persuasion, it serves as almost like for you as like a shield against someone else manipulating you, because you could see it coming a mile away. Because I teach you all the strategies that you would use as an expert salesperson, or a persuader. However, what I also do is I ground it in ethics and integrity. I am very clear with people, and I infuse it into every word I say, every aspect of the system that I teach, about how to use this ethically and honestly to empower people, to help people get the things that they need, versus you just trying to shove something down someone's throat to make a commission. And that's really the distinction that separates ethical persuasion from, negative persuasion or unethical persuasion, is that you're only influencing people to do things that they should be doing, not things that are only in your best interest.
And you can go to bed at night and not worry about a thing.
Well, I'll tell you, probably the best part of my life right now is to go to bed with a clear head and with no lies to keep track of. My mother always said, tell the truth, and it's easier, nothing to keep track of. And the interesting part of my journey is that I come from a really, really good family in terms of ethics, integrity, and I was raised right. And as they say here in the U.S., I took a left turn in Albuquerque, somewhere along the way, and when people say, well, how did you find your way back? How did you become the person you are today? I said, well, the truth is, today, I'm the person that my parents sent out into the world. I was given the right values and the right ethics to go out into the business world and in relationships. But, I took that left turn, and, for those years, I was just not the person I was supposed to be. So now, when I, it was a series of events that really allowed me to look at my life and to really get back to who I was supposed to be. So that's why it was very easy for me to really live the life I'm living now, which is based on ethics and integrity. And, of course, making money, too. I make a lot of money, but the only way I make money is by giving value to people, and that's really the ethical way to get rich.
Isn't that the nice way to do it? Give them good advice, and you can walk away going, I hope they're successful.
Yeah, well, listen, I get about a minimum of 50 to 100 emails per day from all over the world of people who say, you changed my life, you inspire me, I went through your program, or I bought your course, or even sometimes I just watched your videos online. I went to even the movie where people say it connected with them in a way that it just, it changed them fundamentally because, again, this idea that when bad things happen and when you get into a terrible spot and you hit bottom, that it's done, that you just have to curl up in a ball and die. That's, what a lot of people do. And they don't think about it, but they end up doing it because they just get caught up in the cycle of limiting beliefs and negative states. And before they know it, they're living inside a box and in a disempowered life. When they look at what happened to me, they're like, geez, this guy, he lost everything. He was smeared and vilified in the press. He had a huge fine. His wife left him. His children went to the other side of the country. He lost his self-respect. And yet somehow he was managed to take all that and reverse that negative energy and turn it into what it is today, which is, a $500 million movie, a global speaking career and happy relationships in my life. And that's what I, try to do with people when I get up and give a seminar, whether it's 3 hours or 3 days or a week. Sometimes I have something that are as long as a week. What I'm really trying to do with people is teach them the fundamentals of success. It's not just about sort of saying, rah, 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 feel good. It's about the fundamentals, certain strategies that you need to take your passion and monetize it. There are certain strategies that you need to be a salesperson, earn money, versus just saying to them, you're capable of greatness, you're going to be rich, rah, rah, and then they feel good for a few hours, but then they go back to their lives and there's no fundamental change, so there's dissonance and it really almost becomes self-delusion. So by working on both levels, meaning motivation, self-motivation, understanding what your vision for the future is and what your why is, meaning why is it important to you. Most people will say, it's money, I want to get rich, and that's not a powerful enough why. For me, my why was the faces of my children, that I wanted to go out there and, prove to my kids that, I could come back and so on and so forth. But, when you give them that inner game, that's the inner game of success, and then you combine it with the outer game, entrepreneurship skills, sales, marketing, and so forth, that's a combination that changes people's lives.
Could you just, for the few people who haven't seen the movie, outline it? And was it accurate? Was it the way you wrote it in the book?
Listen, there's some things that were very accurate, and other things that were wildly fictionalized. So, and the book really, if you read the book is very accurate. And, the things that were really fictionalized had more to do with my business life than my personal life. The personal life was very accurate, with the exception I didn't punch my wife in the stomach, which is pretty tough for me to see at the end of the movie. And in fact, my ex-wife, were still very good friends, and we took our kids.
That must have been horrible.
Listen, again, it's a movie. They want to make a point. They try to, they have to exaggerate highs and lows because they only have 3 hours and they're looking to move people emotionally. But, when the movie first came out, we had a private screening with my children, and I took my ex-wife, and I took the kids together. Say, listen, this did not happen. This did. So the kids, knew that, the dad didn't turn around and whack them in their mom's stomach and stuff like that. But, other than that, though, the personal life was very accurate. The things in the business life that were not accurate were things like where they had me going from a choir boy, like in the opening scene of the movie, I'm like, refusing drugs and alcohol and saying, well, can't we make our clients money too? And in the next scene, I'm snorting coke in a strip club and blah, 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 right? So in truth, that descent into losing my ethics was a very slow, incremental, insidious affair that happened over years, not hours. So it was really 2 years until I started, starting to go out and party. And when I first started my firm, it was all perfectly legal and ethical. And then step by step, I lost my way. So that was one of the aspects of, that was troublesome to me. But, I accepted it because I love the movie, and, you take the good with the bad. And then another aspect was they focused on, and the companies being like dog shit. And by the way, that's not what it was. It was not like that at all. It was, as you said originally, I manipulated stock. So the problem with that is that's a very difficult and boring thing to explain to an audience in a movie theater. It's better to say the stocks stink. Like then people just get it and they show a picture of a company that's it's a little shack. So again, I understand why Marty did it. So it wasn't like he's trying to screw me over. He's an artist, and the movie is part fact and part fiction. And at the end of the day, like I said, I take the good with the bad, and overall, I love the movie, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, very emotional. And by the way, making things emotional, that happened in Apollo 13 as well. The astronauts never argued amongst themselves after the explosion. They're test pilots. They are the calmest people in the world. They can lose both wings. The engines fall off, and they're going, where are we going for lunch?
Right. Yeah. And
they are so.
But the point is, no one wants to see that in the movie theater. That's boring.
they are just so cool.
They got to have them argue. Conflict is really the basis for people's grabbing their attention. And unfortunately, we see it in the newspapers, in the gossip columns. And there's things that are written about me in the gossip columns. I mean, I saw something the other day which was the funniest thing I've ever seen. It was says I was in the Polo Lounge in L.A. with two producers, and I was yelling and screaming because I'm upset with Leonardo DiCaprio because he's promised to give me acting lessons because I want to become an actor. I mean, he betrayed me because I worked so hard to make the movie great with him, and then he betrayed me. Meanwhile, Leo's a great friend of mine. I speak to him all the time, and the last thing I ever want to do is be an actor. They're like, yeah, that was in print. It's like, you got to ask yourself, where do they come up with this stuff? So,
I was going to say that's the next movie.
Yeah, right. So that's just the least. The things they write just crazy. But and it's funny because I used to believe it. I'd read oh wow, they're in trouble. This couple. Well, it's just all made up. So there you go.
We're speaking with Jordan Belfort, the real Wolf of Wall Street. Did you feel like a wolf when you were doing it?
I mostly, again, the stages of it. In the beginning, I was doing things completely ethical the first couple of years. Then, slowly, insidiously, I took one step over the ethical line, then started doing things right again. But once you take that step, your line of morality moves a bit. Next time you break the law, you go a little further and a bit further still, and before you know it, through these tiny, almost imperceptible steps, you find yourself doing things you thought you'd never do, associating with people you never thought you'd associate with, and it all seems perfectly okay. So in the beginning, that evolution, the de-evolution that occurred, I would say after maybe 2 or 3 years of doing it, I looked in the mirror one day and said, what the hell? Just like it was so out of control, and I felt like a wolf, and listen, I did my best dating after I was married. I was a terrible husband, and the only thing I did well was I was a good father until I got heavily on drugs, and then no one could be a good father. But thankfully, I got sober 17 years ago. My kids were still very young, so they don't even remember that. But there was that time when I really looked at myself, and the way I dealt with that was consuming massive quantities of drugs. On a daily basis, I took enough drugs to sedate most of Vancouver. Okay, it was just nuts.
Well, I don't know if you know Vancouver.
No, trust me. I would take enough, cocaine to send an army marching back to Bolivia, and this is nuts, and pills and this and that, and that allowed me to be the wolf and live with it. Today, my life is so different. The rule I go by in my life right now, both in my business life and my personal life, is that every person I touch and come into contact with, I want them to be better off for meeting me. And even if it doesn't work out, whatever it might be, I want everyone to have, to say they got value from me, they feel like their life improved. And 25 years ago, I would say, unless you were a very close friend of mine in my inner circle, if you came into contact with me, that probably didn't happen. And that's not something I'm proud of. But what I am proud of is that I was able to turn that negative into a positive, whether it's I'm doing charity work in Africa where I can go into townships where there's such poverty and the kids are shut down and they won't listen to anybody. Guess what? They'll listen to me because of the celebrity factor, and also because they know that I've done the drugs, I've been to jail, and it's not someone like from some ivory tower telling them what they should be doing who's never felt their pain. They know that I felt their pain, so they'll listen to me. So it gives me a platform to make change for people that really no one else can reach. And of course, on the other polar opposite are successful people that want to become more successful, or young entrepreneurs. They look at me and they see the wild successes that I've had, and they want to understand how I did that. And most importantly, how did I become successful when I had nothing 7 years ago? It's like that's almost baffles people, and they want to know what is that secret. And the truth is, there is a secret to it. It's a very powerful secret, and one of the elements is a lot of hard work, but there's also strategies behind it, both inner world strategies of how you manage what happens up in your head, and then there's outer world strategies, like I said before, of how you go out into the world and take action as an entrepreneur. How do you learn to do what I call fail elegantly, meaning when you start something, if it's wrong, it's not working out, how do you maximize the lessons and minimizing the financial damage? And on the other side, you have succeeding wildly as an entrepreneur. What do you do when the business is going well and you hit on something and it could be expanded? How do you expand it? How do you leverage it? How do you hire the right people? How do you borrow money from the bank? How do you raise capital? How do you do all the things you need to do to become, take a small business and turn into a big business? Those are distinct strategies. Failing elegantly, succeeding wildly. Those are just two aspects of entrepreneurship. So, when I teach people this stuff, it's like for them, they're like, geez, it's like nothing they've ever heard before, because it mixes motivation with real strategy. And that's the secret why I've been able to take people who really were never successful and who've been to other seminars and didn't really, they felt good, but there was no real change. That, I think, is the difference why I've gotten such great results.
Jordan, is there a website people can go to find out more?
Yeah, it's wolfofwallstreet.ca. wolfofwallstreet.ca. And, I'm going to be there in Vancouver and then Calgary and then eventually over to Toronto and Montreal. But, Vancouver comes first. I've never been to Vancouver. I heard it's an amazing city. So I'm really psyched to come there. And it's going to be, it's a 3-hour event. So, I pack, the amount of information I pack into 3 hours, pretty much staggers people.
You're here on May 1st.
Yep, May 1st.
After the break, Jeff Berwick on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600. 604-699-8600. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is Jeff Berwick, better known as the Dollar Vigilante. Of course, you're talking about the U.S. dollar, but my goodness, we know in Canada, every time the U.S. dollar makes one move, we tend to suffer or benefit one way or the other, but we pay attention.
Oh, definitely. Well, the Canadian dollar is not backed by anything except for the U.S. dollar, and 90% of the economy in Canada is with the U.S., so it's definitely very connected.
And a lot of people say that's very unfortunate.
Well, it is very unfortunate because any sort of fiat currency that's backed by government violence is very horrible and heinous. A lot of people don't know that yet, but they're going to find out.
That whole thing about millions of bullets being snapped up by the government. I mean, I know millions of bullets were used in Afghanistan and Iraq. They had to be replaced. But it seems to me that the bullets that disappeared were the ones that civilians would be using.
Yeah, and it's really sad, actually, when you talk about millions of bullets being used in Iraq or Afghanistan. And, those bullets were used on just men, women, and children who had nothing to do with anything. It's something that we're all going to have to deal with over the next few years. I had nothing to do with it. You didn't have anything to do with it. But, however, through our sort of not trying to stop it enough, we do have some responsibility for all these horrible governments. It's heinous. It's heinous. But it's coming to a close, and that's sort of what I talked about. Is that the Dollar Vigilante is, a lot of this stuff's been, paid for. A lot of this murder and rape and torture has been paid for through these, paper currency units, and they're going away. And some people get scared about it, but, this is really funded, the worst century in human history. And, yes, it will be a dangerous time as it all collapses, but we should all cheer the collapse.
What can we do when that happens? What should we do to prepare?
First of all, just getting the mindset correct that this is not a bad thing, that this is going to collapse. Secondly, if you're even, aware at all, just if you have assets, which not a lot of people do anymore in Canada or the U.S., but if you do, get them into hard assets, anything that Janet Yellen can't print. and also get them outside of your own geographic, the region where the mafia owns you, which if you live in Canada is Canada. I'm originally from Canada, but I left. As the West collapses, which is going to happen, it is happening, just get your assets outside of the area where those people can really control you with guns.
Does that mean take your money out of the bank and put it someplace else?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, I wouldn't keep, I don't keep any of my assets inside of the financial system except for what I need from month to month. What happened in Cyprus, what happened recently in Ukraine will happen all throughout Europe. It will happen in Canada. It will happen in the U.S. And not many people are aware of it. And so I thank you for having someone like myself on to talk about these things, because not many people are aware of what's going to happen to their assets. I call it the most dangerous time in human history for capital right now, because of this artificial system, which is all violence based. And so yeah, just get your assets outside of the system. And I know to many people this is a very new concept. Even yourself, you're asking what should we do? It is difficult, but if you actually just look into it a little bit, just get your assets into harder assets and get them sort of geopolitically internationalized, so that, because most governments will steal all these assets in the next few years and destroy them, which is what government does. But if you have them in a few different areas, especially in things like precious metals or Bitcoin, but I wouldn't say put a lot in Bitcoin, but you have some options.
Should you just take your money and bury it in the backyard?
That's not a bad idea. That's actually a very good idea in general. The only problem that I can see for that is that things will get very dangerous in the West, in Canada, the U.S., Australia, Europe, in the next few years. And even if you have those assets still, you still might find yourself in a precarious situation. So I would the only thing I would add to burying gold in your backyard, which is bizarre in 2014 that we have to think about these things, is just to have a few other options outside of the area where these mafias these governments still pretend to own you.
Well, I know from personal experience, the banks own your money once you hand it over, because every once in a while they'll dip into somebody's account to pay something else off, and you don't even know about it.
Oh yeah, no, this system it's funny because it's a very interesting time, because for the last 100 years or so in the West, we've sort of, and not that it was all like really great, obviously World War I, World War II, Federal Reserve, taxation system. However, it was a really amazing time. Like we're talking right now, I'm in Mexico, you're in Canada, we're talking in real time, we're recording this, it's going to go out on the internet. So technology has really moved us so much forward. But at the same time, governments have held us back so much. And people get confused. They think, oh, there was governments here when all this amazing stuff happened. And they think that maybe government had some role in helping us, but they didn't. And that's really the mindset that people need to get into, is that there's going to be a collapse coming. And we just, the things that we have to appreciate, the things that we have to actually know that are great, all were contributed by private individuals, and nothing government did or does or will do is positive.
That's a scary thought. Of course, here in socialist Canada, where they tell us they know best. But look at how they run the government. Is that really the best way to run stuff? Well,
there is no good way to run a violent organization, of course. The whole concept of government is very, it's evil. It's an unnecessary evil, in my opinion. And yeah, what you're saying there is that you're told by the media and by the government, by the schools, which are run by the government, that Canada is a great place. Nothing against Canada as a geographic region or any particular individual in Canada, but it's just the same as the U.S. now. We were talking about this a little earlier, that I'm seeing a lot of changes happening there, and I'm not really liking what I'm seeing. You see a lot of Canada's now getting involved in all these wars, Afghanistan, There's bases still, I think, Canadian bases in Afghanistan killing just people for no reason. And people stand and salute the troops. Canada used to be, for me, when I was younger, I liked it a little bit because people didn't really have much respect for the country or what they thought of as the government. But now they're turning a little bit like the U.S. They're really supporting it. It's bizarre to see. However, I think there's still a lot of hope there. I was just up in Toronto, and there is still a lot of people who are awake and who are human beings, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I think the connection between Canada and the U.S., which is U.S. is going to be ground zero for this economic and financial collapse, it's going to cause a lot of problems in Canada.
Of course it is. Who are we going to sell our stuff to if they're busy blowing each other up?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Canada, in general, has been doing some correct things, in my opinion. They've started to move towards their economy more towards Asia, which makes a lot of sense. For some reason, Asians, this is how bad China is, or was, that Chinese people want to move to the U.S. or Canada. I think we just have to, the whole world just wants to go somewhere else at this point. We just have to find our own place.
The grass is always greener.
Well, it's all caused, I hate to keep saying this, but it's all caused by government. The reason that Chinese people want to leave China is because of the impositions done to them by the Chinese government. The reason why Americans, some, not all, and Canadians want to leave the U.S. and Canada is because of what's going on with the government. This is actually the entire human history, as far as we know, which is only a few thousand years, which is really interesting to me. So there's got to be more than that. I don't want to get into speculation or anything, but there's got to be more than a few thousand years of recorded human history here. But from what I can tell, the only recorded human history, it's almost always just been people running away from government, which really started in Rome, in Italy, with Jesus 2,000 years ago. And by the end of the Roman Empire, people were just fleeing into what they call the barbarian lands, just to get away from their own government.
Where can we flee to?
That's sort of the question I'm asking. Here's the really positive side of it, though. As bad as all these government things are getting all around the world, people are waking up. And I think there's going to be a massive paradigm shift in the next 5 to 10 years where we could move beyond this evil contraption of collectivism of government. I'm seeing it all the time. I actually see it almost hourly now. I used to see it daily. I used to see it monthly. I'm almost seeing it hourly now, like massive changes and awakening of people realizing who their real enemy is. And I don't like to have any enemies, but who the real unnecessary evil is. And I think people are starting to awaken, and they'll really have to awaken once these systems collapse, which are going to collapse.
We're speaking to the dollar vigilante, Jeff Berwick. Well, you're looking after the dollar, but right now it's in danger of disappearing. We're talking about the U.S. dollar, Iran, Russia, China. They don't plan to use the U.S. dollar anymore when it comes to trading petroleum.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see what's going on right now. Currencies are being used as weapons now, which is interesting. The entire world is moving away from the U.S. dollar. So this is a major change from 50 years ago. It's basically after World War II that the U.S. dollar came into any kind of prominence or usage. But then quite quickly by 1971, Richard Nixon just kind of said, oh, it's not backed by gold anymore. Not many people notice. And now we're all in this fiat currency system, which has caused and actually been behind most horrendous things in life for the last 40 years. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. People have to wake up. If they want to protect themselves a little bit, definitely get outside of the current financial monetary system. This is coming down. It's almost like an avalanche right now. Not many people seem to notice because they watch the government news on CBC or any mainstream media channel, and they keep telling them everything's okay. It's not okay. It's collapsing. And I guess my sort of message is a little bit that don't be worried or sad that the system collapses. This is great that this is going down, but to protect yourself, protect your family and your friends or whoever you want to protect, and get outside of these systems now before it's too late.
What about people who still want to come to Canada, the U.S.? They still think it's a great place to be.
It's bizarre. I've been watching that. Actually, China the Canadian government just said to Chinese people who've been waiting like 2 years to become Canadian citizens that they're not going to accept them anymore. And I run something called TVD passports, and we had so many Chinese people come to us after that. And it was bizarre to me that they wanted to go to Canada. Like, everyone's just fleeing all these systems right now. They're trying to find out where should they go, what should they do. They sense that something's wrong. But no one really knows where to go. And actually, I don't have any good answer either. I'm in Mexico. I think Mexico's by far the freest and most civilized place and safest place in North America by far, because no one here gets robbed of 50% of the money every year. But there is no perfect place. I think the evolution of humanity is going to involve a change in ideas and minds, and it's not going to be physical. And so people are trying to run. They don't know exactly, but what I think people need to do is to expand their mind at this moment in time. You can't run anywhere at this time in life, but if you just change your mindset, you can actually affect your life.
Jeff, always a pleasure talking to you. Is there a website people can go to take a look at some of your stuff?
Yes, of course. Thank you. It's just dollarvigilante.com. We write about this stuff every day, and I really appreciate you getting out this message as you do almost every day, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
After the break, John Williams on This Week in Money.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600. 604-699-8600. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
My guest is John Williams, editor of ShadowStats.com. John, every day the government tells us the economy is improving or it's not. The jobless rate is something. Are those numbers real? Can we trust them?
Well, they are as the government defines them. They're not at all close to common experience. If you look at the way numbers used to be reported, you go back to the 1980s and such, the numbers then were much closer to what people thought they were experiencing in terms of economic activity, unemployment, inflation. In the 30 plus years since, the government has introduced all sorts of methodologies to the reporting series that generally have placed upside biases on the numbers indicating economic growth and downside biases in the numbers that indicate the rate of inflation. So much so that I find most people don't believe the numbers, that they think the inflation's being understated, and that the economic growth is being overstated. And indeed, from a realistic standpoint, again, from the way people look at things, I think that's very much the case. If you take inflation, for example, the Consumer Price Index is the headline number. Most people, when they look for using an inflation number, they're doing something from the standpoint of personal finance, something tied to how much their wages or salary should be going up, or what the return should be on their investments, that they at least want to do better than the pace of inflation. And historically, and this is true for price indices that have been constructed going back literally a couple of hundred years. I mean, this is not a new concept. The way the price index was measured, it was to effectively come up with an indication of a cost of living, of maintaining a constant standard of living. The way they used to do it in the United States was they measured the pricing of a fixed basket of goods, or very crudely, they'd take, let's say, the price of a pound of steak, a gallon of gas, a loaf of bread. They'd price them out this year, then they'd price that same basket of goods out next year. Whatever the price change that was there, that's what had happened to your cost of living of maintaining a constant standard of living. In the 90s, Alan Greenspan and Alan Boskin, Boskin being the fellow who was head of the Council of Economic Advisors for the first George Bush, began putting forth the story that the Consumer Price Index overstated inflation, and if only they could get a more accurate measure of inflation, then they could help reduce a budget deficit, because if they used a more accurate, lower rate of inflation, cost of living adjustments would be less on government programs in the United States, such as Social Security. And so you'd ask them, well, what do you mean it understates inflation? What do you mean it overstates inflation? How does it do that? And the response was, Greenspan used the example of hamburgers and steak. He says steak gets too expensive. People will buy more hamburger because they can't afford the steak. He said if they do that, their cost of living isn't as high, and that's not reflected in the CPI. Well, of course it wasn't reflected in the CPI, because being forced to buy more hamburger because you can't afford the steak is not the same thing as maintaining a constant standard of living. And so they moved away from measuring a fixed basket of goods to substitution basis, where effectively you had a moving target. You're measuring the cost of survival, not the cost of maintaining a constant standard of living.
And they removed two very important things from that index: the cost of your housing and the cost of gasoline, your energy.
Well, they changed the way those things were measured, and one thing that they also did was they introduced a concept of hedonic quality adjustments. Now, when you have quality adjustments, a legitimate thing to consider with a price index. For example, and they have a lot of people go out and survey stores all over the country every month. They might they look at a particular candy bar, and one month it might be an 8-ounce candy bar. The next month it could be in the same size package, but it might be a 6-ounce candy bar. They look for that, and then that's mathematically adjusted so that you pick up the effective price differential per ounce of candy bar or something like that. That's a legitimate quality adjustment. But then the government decided that it really should make quality adjustments that people couldn't measure, very, very nebulous quality factors that they designed computer models, econometric models, to generate the cost savings estimates on. But these aren't cost estimates, cost savings that the average person looks at or thinks about. For example, early on, the government in the United States forced gasoline manufacturers to put a certain additive in gasoline to improve air emission quality. And it added 10 cents per gallon to the cost of gasoline, which is a fair amount of money in those days. The government didn't add that into the CPI because it was deemed to be a quality improvement. But I can tell you that the average guy that was pumping gasoline wasn't thinking, oh boy, I'm spending 10 cents a gallon here to improve the air. He's moaning and groaning because the cost of his fueling his car to go to work had gone up 10 cents per gallon. So that when you're looking at, it's a matter of how you define it and what you're looking at, but if you're looking for an inflation measure that reflects how much the cost of goods you want to buy are going up and what you spend out of pocket, you're not getting an accurate measure in the U.S. CPI, and most other countries have followed suit and with similar methodologies.
How can we plan our economies if the numbers we're using aren't accurate?
Well, it's I think they've about planned us into as bad an economic recession as you can get here in the U.S. There's not much further they can go. They certainly can't improve it with what they're doing. The problem with the economy is severalfold. One of which is the inflation and how you measure it. If you look at indicators such as housing starts or different housing measures, what you'll see is that the economy started turning down in 2006 and it plunged through 2008 to 2009, and then it's been pretty much bottom bouncing at a low level of activity. If you look at our gross domestic product, which is the broadest measure of economic activity that the government publishes, it started the end of 2007, plunged into 2009, and then started recovering, and now has regained its pre-recession high. It's expanding. You're seeing a little bit below average growth, but you're seeing an expanding economy. The problem is that nobody is really seeing that. If you talk to the average person, most businesses are not seeing that, and the problem here is inflation, because they're using too low a rate of inflation when they're reporting these numbers. The economic numbers that you get are adjusted for the effects of inflation. If you're seeing that your sales are going up, that's good to know. I mean, from a strict monetary standpoint, what you're putting in the bank. But you want to know if your business is really up from last year. It's helpful to know how much of that increase is due to inflation. It just prices going up as opposed to the fact that you're selling more goods. So that a lot of the numbers are adjusted for inflation, like our retail sales. And if you use too low a rate of inflation when you're deflating the economic series, the result is you end up with overstated inflation-adjusted growth. And because of these hedonic adjustments, there's about 2 percentage points per year that's being generated in extra growth due to this artificially low inflation. If you take that out, you'll find that the economy plunged and stagnated, much as you're seeing in the series that don't have inflation. If you look at consumer confidence, for example, that was a pattern of plunge and stagnation. There are numbers out of the government that show median household income, and here's why the economy hasn't recovered. It's why we're still having problems. Average household income, and this is adjusted by the government's CPI measure. So it's not the results are actually if you had better quality numbers, there would be worse than are being reported. But as being reported, where the government reports this on an annual basis, in the year 2012, which is the last annual number they put together, the median household income adjusted for inflation, adjusted for the CPIU in the United States, was below where it was in 1967. We have a real income problem here in the U.S. due to very bad U.S. trade policies. If you look at what happened on a monthly basis, and there's a company by the name of Sentier Research in the United States that takes the government's numbers that are actually surveyed on a monthly basis, puts them in presentable format and publishes them. What you'll find is that as the economy plummeted through 2009, through 2008 into 2009, and then recovered, household income kept plummeting, and then it bottomed out. It's again pattern of plunge and stagnation. And I've talked with all the people who are involved in sales for a number of large companies. Their sales patterns usually follow that plunge and stagnation. There's maybe some upswing, but no economic recovery. So my contention is the U.S. economy has not recovered. It hasn't recovered because the consumer doesn't have the ability to fuel the recovery. In the U.S., basically, since they've redefined the GDP series, which they did last year, and added a little bit of growth to it through redefinition, 68% of our economy is accounted for by consumer spending.
We'll have more with John Williams next on This Week in Money.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking to John Williams, editor of ShadowStats.com. John, with so many false figures being thrown at us, what does the government think they're accomplishing by lying to us on a continuing basis?
Well, in terms of the inflation, it's very simple. The government doesn't seem to care. I mean, you can reach a conclusion they don't care in terms of putting out an accurate number that people should use if they're concerned about what they really need to earn to stay ahead of inflation, or what kind of return they need on their investments to stay ahead of inflation. The government's view here is very narrow. The reason for the change in the methodology, the reason for understating inflation, was to reduce the cost of living adjustments for Social Security and such, and that is a way of bringing down the budget deficit a little bit without anybody in Congress having to do the impossible of voting against.
You just have a lot of starving seniors.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, this is I think it's criminal what they're doing there, and they're at least they should be honest with the American people and say you want to, if you're looking for an investment return or you want a salary return that's going to keep up your standard of living, you need something higher. In this last budget deal, they were a little more honest in terms of what they worked out. Instead of, there'd been some talk of introducing a new consumer price index that would be even lower than the one that has been modified over time.
I don't like eating cat food.
I'm sorry?
I don't like eating cat food.
Nice.
I mean, really, that's what they're trying to drive us down to.
Yep.
John, is there anything we can do, or are we just helpless people stuck in a barge that's about to go over a waterfall?
Well, again, a lot of what's involved here is a matter of definition. Where it affects people is maybe how they view their businesses in terms of inflation. It can certainly affect their income and their and their investments. What you need to do is think for yourself. If things don't seem right, they probably are not. Again, I have found that Main Street USA has a much better sense of what's going on in the economy than the government numbers show. And if you think the economy is weaker, it likely is. If you think inflation is higher, it likely is, and act accordingly to protect yourself.
Thanks a lot for chatting with us, John. Maybe, again, remind people about your publication and where to find it.
Thank you, Jim. Publish an electronic newsletter, have a website, shadowstats.com. There's a lot of information available to the public there in terms of our old archives and some special reports that are in the right-hand column of the homepage. We do put out a weekly newsletter that's available electronically, and we always welcome new subscribers.
Thanks to our guests, Jordan Belfort, Jeff Berwick, and John Williams. And thank you for listening. I'm Jim Goddard for Phil Mackesy. We're back next week with more This Week in Money.
This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.